Welcome. Gio and I are here today with Tom Bruister, Chief Revenue Officer at LiquidSpace. I think we've had Mark on the podcast. Mark has been on my podcast a couple times. He's one of our,
Yes.
He's an industry favorite for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, Gio, I'll let you jump in since you recruited Tom, but I have
Yeah. So,
for Tom. And
so this has been about,
yeah.
This has been three months in the works, right? Tom and I connected. I don't even, if you'd officially started yet when we started going back and forth on the Palo Alto transaction, but it was early on and I'll let him jump into his background, but he's got an incredible background in the industry from a different side than what we're typically used to getting into. And so quickly I went to recruit him and he's like, well, let me get my feet wet and get comfortable and get everything there. And then we had to get him worked into the schedule. But, why don't we start with that, Tom? What's your background? Kind of how did you get into the space?
Sure. And I don't know if my feet are quite wet yet, but maybe they're getting a little damp. So yeah, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at LiquidSpace. Been here about 5 months now. It's really flown by. So new in the seat, but not necessarily new to the industry. I held a number of roles at WeWork. Was there about 4.5 years, and for the past 2 led their enterprise business. So as you think about the top 800 companies that did business with WeWork and then were headquartered in North America, fell within my purview. Prior to that was the head of real estate, so sat on the occupier side for a ad tech company based in San Francisco, grew them from 5 to 25 locations globally. And that's when I was really first introduced to the flexible space in 2016. WeWork was one of our first vendors, and through that transition is how I was finally introduced to the WeWork team and ultimately took a role there. Prior to that was with McKesson, so as a director of transaction management, ran their transaction program for about 1.5 years. It's the largest company most people have never heard of, Fortune 7 company, but was on the transaction side. So bought them dirt, bought large office space, build to suit transactions. And then prior to that was with Jones Lang LaSalle for about 8.5 years in their corporate services business. So large corporate customers, Bank of America, Kaiser Permanente, it's a large healthcare system. Depending where you are in the country, you would likely know them. Sun Microsystems, which dates me, they're not a company anymore. They're ultimately purchased by Oracle, and started as a financial analyst there and worked my way up to running the transaction management business for a large portion of those corporate customers.
Yeah. And I think the coolest part where we're all trying to figure it out right now is what your role was at WeWork and kind of what you picked up doing there at LiquidSpace is the enterprise side of the business, right?
Okay.
Is that the transactions and how big is the overall business going to be with some of the enterprises, right? And how do we build the space and, the different ways of looking at it. And you guys have taken a really unique kind of approach to it. And it was kind of free you and kind of you've been able to step in and kind of revamp things. I mean, we worked on a few things collectively. And so just kind of why don't you talk about kind of what your actual role was at WeWork within that enterprise space and why it made sense for you to make the transition over to LiquidSpace and kind of what you've been tasked with?
Yeah, sure. So I joined WeWork in June of 2019, which was an interesting time given it was about 6 weeks before the S1 came out the first time, the IPO imploded. Adam Newman left shortly thereafter. So I always say, I jumped on the boat about 10 seconds before we hit the iceberg, and not really the drinking brandy and lighting money on fire period. But, I think the pandemic has fundamentally changed the way that the enterprises view flexible space and how they're thinking about portfolio planning. And I often said we sold portfolio insurance to companies and enterprises because, they can't plan in optimal conditions, and now it's impossible, right? And even before the pandemic, but exacerbated by what was a very obviously challenging time in human history, was companies not wanting to make long-term capital intensive decisions. And now they can't do it, right? And part of WeWork's value prop was they were providing larger spaces to the enterprise demand sourcing. So you're thinking full floors, full buildings. That ability to do so has somewhat diminished given their bankruptcy and their capacity, their capital constraints. And so those types of spaces are shrinking a bit. The other competitors, Notel, et cetera, no longer exist or exist in a much smaller capacity as well. So that space isn't quite existing in the marketplace, but it's still in significant demand for enterprise customers. And, we at LiquidSpace do a number of different things. And one of those, which you somewhat references, are AltSpace, or a managed service solution. So providing that larger space where you might need 50, 100 full-time employees, we can do that on a full turnkey basis. Everything from upfront planning, design, deploy, and then ultimately once we toss you the keys and helping you operate the space. So, thinking about what that demand looks like, but, the enterprise customer is continuing to grow with with how they infuse Flex. It's now part of their DNA. They now understand it. I still think we're early in this baseball game, if to use a sport reference, but probably in the second inning, and companies are still trying to figure out. But I think they'll continue to look at Flex as a key component of their portfolio, from everything from on demand, which is our core business, our core technology solution, to dedicated, which is a traditional co-working space, to the managed office solution that I just referenced.
I have a question I'm going to sneak in. So AltSpace is not new. I think as Mark does, he often is way before his time. I mean, can you you don't have all the history, but like it was a thing, kind of faded a little bit, and now it's coming back, which I think makes sense. But I'd love to hear you talk about, what is that solution? What demand is that?
I think Mark has been very prescient in the way that he's thought about the real estate industry, the way he's thought about the co-working industry, and started the on demand. We were the first flexible marketplace, as you know, in 2010, which predated our competitors by a number of years, but also it was before its time. And I don't think enterprise customers even would have thought about that as a true solution, right? And it was really a B2C marketplace, and it took the pandemic for us to evolve that, to put all the back-end controls, data analytics, et cetera, for enterprises to really adopt that, I think, in critical mass. But to AltSpace, we did a number of those prior to the pandemic. And again, I think it was early, right? And companies didn't quite understand the managed office solution, didn't understand how you would infuse that into your portfolio strategy. And now the pandemic has flipped that on its head, right? And so now that we've seen the enterprise demand come back, again, not wanting to make long-term capital intensive decisions. Oh, by the way, real estate teams have shrunk and have become more important and have a seat at the table with C-suites, chief product officer, chief technology officer, chief people officer. But yet those teams have so much shrunk over the past 2 or 3 years, given what's gone on in workplace and workforce strategy. So you have a smaller team that's required to deliver these projects, and therefore you somewhat need staff augmentation. And I think that's where AltSpace comes in, is where we'll have that conversation with an enterprise, provide a bespoke plan, strategy, infuse mission, vision, values, the company's DNA into the makeup and the construction of the space, use our best-in-class partners to design, use data-infused programming. We know obviously what other enterprises are wanting and needing, and we have information from our marketplace that we can deploy and include in that programming, and ultimately construct it. And as I said, once they toss you the keys, we can continue to operate and provide data feedback in that feedback loop, so you continue to optimize your space. And as you look at more AltSpace or managed office solutions, optimize the program or what you ultimately build.
Yeah. So I think, you guys are extremely valuable, right? And when I say you guys, I mean, y'all that have the enterprise knowledge and then have the co-working relationship, and in your case, the service provider side, right? So last year, and you and I have never had this conversation, but Jamie knows, last year I flew to Dubai, Denver, and I clicked on the Dubai link. And so I got a call that said, "Hey, you were selected for Coordinate." I was like, "That's awesome." They're like, "It's in Dubai." So that was number one. I couldn't turn down Dubai because then they wouldn't give me Denver. So I got to do both in Denver with Coordinate. And some of the questions that came up from enterprise users were, how are y'all servicing our space? How are our needs? How are y'all providing space that we can use? And my comment was like, well, we don't know what you need. You know what you need. And then you need to tell us what that necessity is. And in my experience so far, and I'm having conversations obviously at different levels than you, most of these enterprise groups are still trying to figure out what their needs are, right? And so it's people like you that can step in and help them kind of figure out what that strategy is, how to work through it. So let's start with an example of you going into a new enterprise, right? Whether you have a relationship with them or not, but you've never done business with them. Kind of how's that exploration process, right? And whiteboard sessions look to figure out, hey, are we a good fit? And what are you looking for? And all that other fun stuff.
Yeah, I think it is a discovery process, right? And I think you're absolutely right. Most enterprises are formulating a hypothesis. They're starting to formulate a strategy, but we're still early days. We're 4 years post or into the pandemic. We're only, I think you'd say, a few years post pandemic, and a lot of companies still haven't come back to work in earnest, or they don't quite understand exactly what their workforce. And there's a head of real estate who I think defined this very well, said it's no longer workplace planning, it's workforce planning, right? It's truly understanding the way that your teams work. It's understanding the tools that they need to be successful, who they want to work with, and then formulating a strategy around that. And I don't think the headquarters will ever go away. I don't think direct or traditional leasing will ever go away. I think it will serve a different function and will be the embodiment of those mission, vision, values. It will be where you do all hands. It will be where you do training. But there is a hub and spoke strategy, and defining how companies are thinking about their workforce and truly taking a people-centric approach, I think, is the way to do that. And so that's the conversations that we start to have, is really understanding what do you need, and what is driving, what are your key metrics, what are you looking to achieve, what does success look like? And that's a myriad of things. It could be employee engagement and collaboration. It could be cost reduction, which obviously we're hearing, particularly with challenging macroeconomic conditions, and space reduction because you have low utilization, and that has continued to persist, I think, in the US more than most international locations. But holistically, if you're looking at a global company, you have utilization challenges. And that's not new, by the way. Pre-pandemic, the dirty secret was you were hovering around 64% utilization. Now it's far lower than that. So really understanding from a corporate what they're trying to achieve, and then tailoring the LiquidSpace program to meet those and achieve those goals. And we talked a little bit about AltSpace, but we operate across the entire hybrid continuum. So everything from the on-demand transactions where you can book an office by the hour, by the day, dedicated transactions where you take a space for a month or longer, or AltSpace. We operate at every one of those points. And I think the optimal real estate solution actually takes all of those, right? And so looking at either a specific market or multiple markets. And by the way, we're augmenting our capabilities and offering that we provide to enterprises, taking a data-driven approach. And so using two uniquely large data sets. One is our transactional database. We've executed more than 10 million transactions over the past decade plus. And then we have a very large behavioral data set, understanding how enterprises are engaging and utilizing physical space. So marrying those two together, and then we can make actionable recommendations back to these enterprises that say, you might have a 10 million square foot portfolio, of which we know a portion is traditional leased and meet your requirements, and great, and continue to operate those spaces. But for regional headquarters or dispersed teams, then a hub and spoke or spoke approach might be more appropriate. And we actually have the data to prove, one, what the engagement is likely to look like, and then two, apply real transactional data and economics, providing costs so you can make a data-driven decision. And so starting with the rooting in data, understanding a people-centric approach to their workforce, marrying those two, and then coming to a strategy that makes sense for a large enterprise.
I think one of the interesting aspects of LiquidSpace, because we keep talking about the fact that enterprise clients are still, second inning, figuring it out. They've got they still have leases, right? So
Sure.
If they had a 10-year lease on something when we started the pandemic, we're not there yet for them to make those decisions. But a platform like LiquidSpace allows them to experiment. Like, to your point, in the data, it's like, okay, well, what do people want to do, and where do they want to do it? Do they want to meet? Do they want to do heads down work? Like, what's going to, why do they need to leave home, or what do they want to do when they're not at HQ? Or so it's like almost like a learning tool, because they could give access. And then to your point, like, you feed back the data. Okay, this is what your people are doing, so here's what you probably need, and like really evolve over time.
Yeah,
It's
it's not one size
flexible
fits
way.
all. It's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
I have two young children, and so heads down work may not be necessarily conducive to what I need to do that day. If it's, towards the end of summer, like it was a few weeks ago, that's very challenging, right? So I may want to do focused work and come into a co-working space. Or if I need to meet with the team and collaborate, we may want hot desks, we may want an office. We find that somewhere about 85% collaboration, 15% focused work. But again, it's not one size fits all. And a good example too is one of our very large enterprise customers in the LA market had 5 traditional leases pre-pandemic. They let go of 3 of them because they saw very low utilization, but they've engaged LiquidSpace, one, to support that workforce, but also understand the data at a very granular level. And they've booked with us more than 8,000 times what we would call engagements across 100 different providers. And so not just the large co-working operators that you'd know, but all the local and regional partners that are really incredible that most people may not have been exposed to. And when we open the aperture of choice through LiquidSpace. And so they found that they saved 80% versus their traditional lease costs. And oh, by the way, there is an economic benefit potentially for them taking a dedicated space from the data, from understanding how people are voting with their feet. And it's not conjecture, right? They know that they can also pinpoint where those heat maps are, take a space that is in a optimal location under optimal economics because we can size it appropriately. We have all that data, and then ultimately continue to iterate, pilot, or hypothesize, and then test those hypotheses in real world situations.
So you brought up children, right? And you brought it up before we started recording. So you like you said, you've got young children, so that totally changes your world and dynamics around that. So talk to us a little about what that's done. I mean, what's it like to be a father of young children, and just the beauty and the chaos of it, right? Because it is beautiful chaos.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I love my children very much. I like them most of the time. I have 2 young boys, and so their interactions are really fun to see. And we're getting to a fun age with both of them, where my oldest, I had a conversation around space last night, and he's very interested in science, which is fun. And the younger one is starting to engage and interact with his brother. And we had some challenging times. And my older son is Erickson, my younger son is Marshall. And when Marshall said Erickson for the first time about 6 months ago, that changed the dynamic completely. And it's, when we first had Marshall, brought him home, and, I think Erickson was expecting a 3.5-year-old playmate. We bring home a baby, and what is this? And so now that engagement is a lot of fun to watch. Although I will say I probably haven't slept much in the last 5.5 years, but it certainly changes your perspective on priorities, on work. And I think just kind of relating it back to LiquidSpace's ethos, work from where it works, this role in particular, but also the flexibility and choice that it provides, allows me to spend more time with the family that I wouldn't have had in a prior life or with a different employer. And so, I was able to see my son's first, we take him to kindergarten last week, and to experience that, there was a lot of tears, me, not him, but without this new hybrid flexible world, I think that would have been unlikely that I would have had that opportunity. And frankly, I came to AltSpace, which I'm sitting here today, which is one of our really great local partners, which is 10 minutes away from my house. So the hybrid world, again, that it was a horrible event in human history with the pandemic, but I think it changed how we think about work. Where it used to be management by presence. If you weren't in the office 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, you left at 3 p.m. to see your kid's soccer game, or you showed up at noon because you took them to kindergarten, you get a side eye from your manager. And I think, while there are still a few companies or industries that think that way, that's the exception, not the rule. And what has happened in the rise of co-working and flex and hybrid is really beneficial and positive. And I think, we're going to continue to see that grow as more companies think about the return to office, really do take a people-centric approach. And I think that's only beneficial not only to the workforce, but the co-working industry as well.
Yeah. And I mean,
who get to have their dad around more.
What's that?
I said, and to your kids who get to have their dad around.
Yes. And you'd have to ask them. I think they like it, but dad can be more present, which is something that I will always be very grateful for.
So at this age, what do they love doing?
Other than watching Paw Patrol? Yeah, my oldest, he's done a number of different things. He plays soccer. He loves music. He loves drawing. So he likes many things. We're trying to figure out what those few things are that maybe he gravitates towards. But we're certainly experimenting with whatever he wants to do and whatever he's into. And the younger one is very much an outdoors person like my wife. We have a creek that's in the backyard of our house in San Anselmo. So he's down there most days. And, if he's inside for 2 minutes, he wants to be outside. So, we're figuring out what they like, and whatever that is, that's what they'll do.
Which is so abnormal, right? With having the kids want to be outside, right? It's just that was with my buddy that I was telling you about before we started recording, and he calls children in this generation iPad children because that's all they ever want, right?
Well, there's still some of that, but we're trying to be as good about it as possible, as encouraging them to do things in the physical world versus just laser focused on the iPad. It's challenging, right? But we're making some progress. Like I said, we got soccer, we got swimming, we got karate, we got all kinds of stuff. So we'll continue to do those things.
Well, good. That's awesome. So kind of switching back to the professional side of stuff. I mean, let's talk about an example of a group that you're working with. You don't have to mention their name, but kind of as you walk in, and part of it is trying to help them formulate a portfolio strategy, right? And it's not always around flex, and it's not always about long-term leases. So can you give us an example of how you've been able to step in with your team and kind of help a group figure out their portfolio strategy and how to go about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one example that I previously gave about the company that's leveraging us in LA is a good one, and that's good. How companies are thinking about a differentiated solution now.
Yeah.
And there's a number of companies, either existing customers or prospective new customers, that we really do want to get further up the strategic food chain. And in those conversations at an earlier time period and stage gate, because if it's just at the end of a survey where a company is trying to then execute on a solution, then it's probably too late, right? And so we're doing a lot of work where I mentioned some of the data-driven insights that we can provide, but we have the ability to ingest portfolios. And so you could provide us a specific market. You have a 15,000 square foot office in Raleigh, and you need some guidance relative to what the optimal strategy would be to deploy, or you have 100 locations globally. And we can ingest either that one or the portfolio holistically, and then make actual recommendations based upon the data-driven AI augmented engine that we have, and say, look, you may have a 10-year lease in Denver that is utilized and is economically efficient, and you should keep it, and that's fine. But you may have space in Singapore that is a dedicated co-working space for 20 that's not utilized. That should be a spoke, and some combination in between. And so, there's the specific examples, and then there's more generally, it's just a process and how we're trying to engage with customers at a very early strategic point, that they actually can change course, they can course correct, and they can make that optimal decision based upon a large data set that they probably don't have.
I have a question. So, okay, coming from WeWork, I'm curious, your eyes may have been open to, what's out there besides WeWork, like the non-WeWork Industrious, IWG. What's your view of the ecosystem, now that you've seen sort of the longer tail and kind of how it fits in and what the future looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't have the visibility into the larger ecosystem at WeWork. And as I was thinking about enterprise transactions or competition, it was Regis, it was potentially Industrious, some of the landlord solutions that are out there, or a direct lease or sublease. And frankly, it was most often there's a sublease that's a third of the price. How are we competing? How are we demonstrating value beyond a sublease that is in a very challenged market? All right. I didn't have the transparency or the visibility into the 6,000 different operators that are on our platform. And I never would have guessed there is an operator as competent as good, and frankly, the space is as lovely as it is, 10 minutes away from my house. That just wasn't something that was in my knowledge base. And so it's really exciting to see that there is a fragmented but yet growing co-working industry, and one that the operators are continuing to improve, evolve, iterate, and deliver exceptional services. And I think that and certainly not to speak ill of my former employer. I think WeWork is an incredible operator and provides an exceptional product, and also created a category. But I don't think that they understand how this market is growing and how it is evolving. And there are really great options that are right around the corner from a WeWork that are enterprise grade. And just as that company that I referenced a few minutes ago, they've used 100 different operators in the LA area.
Wow.
And
Okay, I
so,
love that stat because I was curious, like, yeah, if you think the enterprise demand will still kind of lean into, the WeWorks and the Regis, IWG.
and I think they will, only because it's what they know,
Yeah.
right? And so when you do open up that aperture to choice and you do demonstrate that there are these really incredible providers that are not named WeWork, Industrious, and IWG, and they use them one time and their workforce is delighted by the experience that they have, then that changes that mindset. But a lot of enterprises, again, are still early in this game. It's still the second inning, and they use what they know, which is one or two providers, not the thousands that are really incredible that are out there. But it's coming. I think it is changing, and I think a platform like LiquidSpace allows them to see that, allows them to understand the data, not only where their employees are voting with their feet, but the sentiment, right? We have a rating system, and you can see it's out of 5 and 4.9 and 5s for a lot of these providers, demonstrating the delight that these companies' workforces have when they go into these spaces. So it's changing. It's changing slowly, but I think it will continue to evolve. And I think, more enterprises will look to other providers to achieve their goals.
So you raised a great point about the category of WeWork and having created a category. And the reality is, back to your Avant conversation, right, where you're sitting right now, right, is there's different categories within the co-working area, right? And even if we want to use that, let's use flexible workspace, right? And so you can break it up into executive suites, co-working, event space, all kinds of other stuff. And so how do you feel about the evolution of these specializations, of these more boutique-y type groups, and how do you see it also affecting the larger ones, right? IWG, for example, is already kind of trying to create a Bonvoy type of offering with different brands.
Look, I would say choice is overwhelmingly positive, right? It gives companies the ability to identify the optimal way to solve a problem. And I think you touched on one, but I do think event space is going to continue to grow as part of this category. And we see the onsite is the new offsite, where companies would go to a hotel in San Diego or whatever it might be. Well, the onsite is where they all meet for that one time in a quarter, right? And so co-working providers that have the ability to truly have dynamic, flexible space that can fit a group of 50 or 100 or 150, which I know is challenging, just given what happens to that space when you don't use it the other 98 or 90 or 85% of the time, whatever it may be, but that it's flexible, that can meet and achieve those opportunities is going to be important, because we see enterprises want that, right? And so the growth of these either niche spaces or very specific spaces to that category, I think is beneficial, because it allows pick your company to use that for their onsite, offsite, and potentially use on-demand space for another use case. And then they have a dedicated 20-person office in a WeWork or Regis, and then just Industrious or another local provider. And that can solve that through a number of different channels. And through LiquidSpace, obviously, we have the ability to aggregate that on our platform, deliver that under one invoicing cycle, one bill. And so, we think it's a pretty elegant solution, but we do see the category continue to evolve and fracture, but in a positive way.
Okay, Gio, I'm flipping it back to personal. I want to know about your master's in econ and your path from there.
Yeah. So I graduated in, I guess I'm going to say it.
You don't, no pressure.
Well, I will say the early aughts. I graduated from Santa Barbara in the early aughts, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life. And so I went to law school.
As one does when one is unsure, but
right. So I took the LSATs. I did fine. I went to law school, got to law school, and realized I really, really didn't want to be a lawyer. which is kind of funny because I spent the better part of my career negotiating contracts, but that's an aside. So I loved economics. I went back to Santa Barbara to get a graduate degree in economics. And I thought about academia and did I want to continue to progress, get the PhD in economics? And I realized when the math stopped having numbers, I couldn't do it anymore. And so it was probably time to rethink that. And so after graduate school, I actually went to work for Pacific Investment Management Company, which is a large fixed income security company that most people own in their 401ks. And then it was also just moving numbers around. And it's so cliche, but I really love the tangibility of real estate. My father was a real estate broker for 25 years. So I grew up with it. It was always in my blood. I tried to avoid it as hard as I possibly could, I guess. But at some point in that journey, I called my dad and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do this anymore. He said, have you thought about real estate? As a father does. And serendipitously, I applied to Jones Lang LaSalle, and it was a Thursday. This was 2000. I'll say it. It was 2006. The market was hot, and they said, if you want the job, you got to start on a Monday. And so we figured it out. I moved to San Francisco, and that was that. But I do think the fundamental, the basis in economics and math and numbers has been really beneficial for my career. I still try to use. I certainly don't use econometric forecasting. But just, LiquidSpace, we really try to take that data-driven approach and building models and using data to inform decisions. And that's something that was certainly infused in the way that I thought about the world at a young age and through my college experience. And, I look back on it fondly and try to use some of it when I can today.
Yeah, we'll even go back further on that personal stuff even more. So you mentioned you were an athlete, right? You mentioned you played baseball. So how did your competitiveness kind of help mold your professional career, right? I mean, I can tell you're sitting here with Jamie, who is extremely competitive even to this day. So how does that drive you?
Yeah, look, I think most people that are in sales have obviously a competitive nature, and a lot of them have played sports at one point. And I did play baseball for quite a number of years. I wound up tearing my rotator cuff my senior year. And so that was sort of the end of that as a pitcher. I wasn't going much further. But I think that, the thing that I loved about sports was the team camaraderie, right? And you rally around something, you get excited about something, and you celebrate victories. And there's not a lot of professions that allow you to do it in just a very straightforward way. And sales is you win or you lose. You win a deal, and when you win a deal, it's inevitably a team effort. And not saying we have a gong here at LiquidSpace, but just the ability to say, we worked really hard. We practiced. We did our best, and ultimately we were successful. And being able to celebrate that with the team is something that certainly drives me and why I enjoy sales. But I think it's directly relatable. And being a leader of a sales team and being a part of also something it's competitive, but it's inherent in sports and the coaching and mentorship, something I really enjoy. And having the ability to impart knowledge and bring folks along and be part of those victories is something that I always enjoy and is really deeply important to me.
And so what's the future look like that they're at LiquidSpace in general with AltSpace and everything else? I mean, what in a perfect world, how does this evolve for you and your team, and what are your goals?
Yeah, look, I think it is continuing to grow our business across all of those points on the hybrid continuum. We're seeing significant growth in our SaaS technology, our SaaS platform. We're continuing to iterate on it and focus on the team collaboration, social collaboration, making it very people-centric, creating that virality and that engagement that is somewhat lacking in the digital world, and trying to bring some of those collaborative collisions that you have in a physical workspace and fostering them and doing that organically through our technology. So the growth of our SaaS platform, it's our core business, and we'll continue to focus there, continuing to focus on our dedicated transactions and growing that business. AltSpace, as you said, I think really doubling down on the data-driven analytics. We have a uniquely large data set, transactional data set, and behavioral data set that we can leverage that is incredibly exciting to corporates, because irrespective of who they're talking to, no one else really has it, whether it's a technology solution or traditional brokerage. And so we feel really comfortable, really excited in the way that we can get further upstream with enterprise customers. But for us, it's, how do we solve problems? How do we think about where this is going and where the industry is evolving and what's happening in the ecosystem? Because I truly believe we're at an inflection point. This is a time in history where the real estate industry hasn't evolved much in the last 70 years past, the open floor plan that Frank Lloyd Wright helped foster and bring forward, right? So we're in this uniquely interesting period in history. And what I think would have taken 10 or 15 years probably just took 2 years because of the pandemic. And I continue to reference it, but I do believe it was the catalyst in completely changing the trajectory of where the real estate industry is going. And more importantly, corporates or how enterprises are thinking about it, because there was a whole change management piece of this that, while I think is still important, it has been mitigated somewhat because folks did work from home for 2 years, proved that that could happen. And I think allowed executives to think differently, right? So how can we plug in and solve real problems for companies at scale using our technology and our experience? We've been doing this for a decade and decade plus. And so, enterprise proven, and using that information to provide optimal solutions to our customers or prospective new customers. I'm really excited. I think this is a time that history will look back on and acknowledge that there was a clear differentiation in the way that solutions and offices and workforces were provided for from 2020 on. And you see that fork, you see that divide in the road.
So what were the characteristics, both professionally and personally, about Mark that excited you about joining LiquidSpace?
Oh, I sort of referenced it earlier, but I said he was very prescient in the way that he thought about the industry. But he's such a visionary. You hear him speak once, and I hung up the phone. I talked to my wife, and I was like, I don't know what I might take this job with a smaller company. And I will tell you, WeWork was at a weird time, in our history as it was going through or going through Chapter 11. And so, not that I was looking, but Mark sort of called me out of the blue, and he really painted this incredible picture and vision, and not only of where the industry is, but where it's going, and that inflection point, all the stuff that I just talked about. Probably said it more eloquently and succinctly than I did, but it was something that I fundamentally believed and was excited about, and he was able to draw that picture really clearly and really vividly, and not only where it was, but where we're going. And so for me, I got to a place where there's no other place I'd want to be in the real estate ecosystem than where I sit today, because I think we are uniquely positioned for change. And we are uniquely positioned to support and aid enterprises in this transition, in this journey, in this evolution or revolution that's taking place right now. And so for me, it wasn't really a choice. It was maybe coming to grips with the transition, but it was very clear after the first conversation I had with Mark, his vision, where it was going and what LiquidSpace can deliver. And so that got me really excited.
Okay, I have a question, and I'm going to bring in your econ background, supply and demand.
It's been a while, so tread lightly, please.
Okay, are you worried about supply, maybe in the short term? So it's clear you're optimistic about where we're going longer term. I think Mark actually just posted something about optimists and pessimists on LinkedIn. So, optimistic, but in the short term, we have WeWork like crawling out of bankruptcy, acquired by, and I'm doing the fireside chat with Anat at the DWA conference. So I need some material, so WeWork's a little on the struggle bus. I'm not sure how many landlords want to sign more leases with WeWork in the short term, although you may have
people have short memories, I think, but yes.
Yeah. And then independent operators, the interest rates, there's just a lot of challenges in terms of increasing supply right now. What does that concern you? Do you think how do you think about that?
Yes and no. I think the increase in supply will be important. I think it somewhat depends on what that supply is and what its purpose is, right? So I think there is diminished supply as it relates to larger space, enterprise space. WeWork in their in their portfolio optimization or rationalization exercise, reduce their enterprise space. And so it's less larger space, more 4P, 10P, depending on the location. But you are seeing some of that replaced by landlords, right? And so I think I'm not quite sure how it's all going to get there, but I'm confident that there is a movement and progression to adding supply to the market. I do think we need more larger event space. I talked about that earlier, and I think that will continue to grow, and we need to continue to focus there. But it's going to come because the demand exists. And so demand will drive that supply, will drive economics. It will drive profitability models that make sense. And I think the other piece to this too is the whole capital markets discussion around landlords and having the institutional money have the ability to value buildings with flexible components to them. And that's been somewhat of a challenge, or maybe not challenge, or hasn't been a focus. But I think when you see vacancy rates plus 30% in major markets, that changes the conversation, and these landlords need to think creatively and think differently about how they fill their buildings, or what is the mix of amenities and co-working space. And so I think institutional money is starting to understand that, starting to understand how to underwrite it, which is the most important, and lend against it. And once that happens, I do believe you'll see more supply coming from the landlord side, which is healthy.
Yeah.
And the demand will drive supply. So in the short term, for certain subsets of that supply, I think it could be problematic, because you may not have what companies want in a certain market of a certain size, but it's going to work itself out. Supply and demand usually converge to the optimal solution, and it will here too. It might just take some time.
Is that your question? She was so excited. She pinged me. She's like, I have another question for him.
Well, I just wanted to get in my serious question before
Okay.
before I ask our wrap up.
How did I do with my economics? Because like I said,
excellent. Yes, thank you. Gio, anything else before we wrap here?
No, I mean, I'm just excited. I mean, little teaser. I don't know, when do we have this scheduled for, before or after GWA? Because he's going to be on stage with Emily Watkins with...
Oh, you are? Oh, good. I was going to ask if you were coming. I didn't want to make you feel bad if you had to say, no, I'm not coming. So great. We'll get to meet you in person. Gio, we have not teased the conference nearly enough this year. We're usually the marketing arm for the GWA conference. So, okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
no.
And
so it'll be
Watkins,
awesome.
All-star panel.
Well, LiquidSpace also, so Mark will be kicking off day one with some of their data and stuff like that. So that's exciting. And then Tom
Mark
and
is
Emily
one of those speakers that every year the GWA is like, well, Mark speaks every year. Should we really ask him again? This is supply and demand. There is always demand for Mark Gilbreth.
And Mark loves it. He's, as I've said, the thing that drew me to Mark, he's a visionary, and I love the way that he paints the picture of where the industry's going. So that is going to be an exceptional keynote address, and I'm looking forward to it. And Emily Watkins, I've known her for a number of years. She truly is a rock star. Humbled to be on stage with her. So I couldn't be more excited to attend. I think that's the first day on the 11th.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we'll get a lot of LiquidSpace day one. So excited to meet you in person, Tom. And thanks for taking time to do this. I know there's a lot going on right now, and taking time to do this. And so I'm excited to get this out there and get people to understand some of the things y'all are working on and opportunities, and certainly with you leading the team, and you've got a great team. And so I'm excited just to see how things continue evolving.
Me as well. And very sincere thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun, and look forward to hopefully seeing you and everybody else.
We have one more question. Gio.
Oh, Jamie has a wrap up fun question.
Okay, since you're coming to the GWA, sometimes we do karaoke. And if you found yourself in a room with a beer in your hand and someone handed you the microphone and you just had to pick a song, what song would that be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Wonderwall, maybe?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, a little Oasis.
Okay.
Don't Stop Believing, maybe?
Okay. Yeah, there's a crowd pleaser. Yeah, there's no wrong answer. It's your karaoke song.
I feel like there could be a few wrong answers, but hopefully that.
Okay, perfect. We'll meet you in person. And yes, this will go live then before the conference. So look forward to meeting you in person.
You as well. Thank you both.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.